Welcome back to Politics is Broken, the show where Canadian politics is currently like watching your neighbor's house on fire while you can see them through their living room window watching Love is Blind, and you're standing there with a garden hose and no pants. You want to help, but you're also thinking, shouldn't someone else be dealing with this? This week we're joined by Elizabeth May, Green Party leader, environmental champion, and probably the only person in Ottawa who can read a 400-page regulatory assessment and still smile. We'll talk about the fallout from the death of Charlie Kirk in the U.S., a tragedy as conservatives like Michelle Rempel Garner demanding Prime Minister Carney make a statement because apparently the house next door on fire means we can feel the heat. We'll also get into Carney's big, beautiful projects, LNG, nuclear, ports, mines, the kind of stuff that sounds like you're playing Fortnite until you remember there are actual humans involved. And finally, we'll ask, is the honeymoon over for Mark Carney, or was it more of a long weekend at the Holiday Inn Express? That's all ahead. Stick around.
Welcome to Politics is Broken with Brittlestar and Lisa B. Canadian and global politics unspun. Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
So welcome to Politics is Broken. My name is Brittlestar.
My name is Lisa, and I never get tired of that intro.
I know.
My name is Elizabeth, and hey, everybody.
Oh, my goodness. It's nice to be a trio again, just briefly, isn't it, Lisa?
Auntie Liz is in the house.
Auntie
Love it.
Elizabeth May, of course, joining us today, and we're very honored and grateful that you're able to spend some of your time and some of your insight. I think one of the things that I like best about you, Elizabeth, is that...
I love this whole theme, a whole category.
Yeah,
keep going.
Just how great you are. One of the things I like best about you, Elizabeth, is I think you come across as a little bit fun-loving, a little bit, a little wacky sometimes, but you also know your stuff. Oh, yeah. Which is great.
Well, thank you. And I love that. Well, I don't think I could stay sane in my life and my job without hanging tightly to a sense of humor. So that's partly why I, totally love what you do on Politics is Broken and all the other stuff you do.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And it's working for you. Don't change. Don't ever change. That's what I'm saying to you.
Thank you. I'll try. I'll try to hang on to the. God, I don't think I would know how. Every now and then someone says, we really ought to stay on message. And I say, who's going to give me a message I have to stay on? The Green Party is very grassroots, right? And the leader isn't the boss. And there's a lot of things that percolate up from the grassroots. And they're not exactly like sending me like the other parties have this very crisp top-down, of enforced messaging that all the MPs have to say the same things and heckle the same words at the same time. I swear to God, in question period, I think the other parties, but particularly the Conservatives, I think they send out to all their MPs ahead of time, if anyone on the Liberal benches uses this word, that's when we want you to break out into raucous laughter. And it feels so fake all the time. So that's one thing that I think people can count on with me is what you see is what you get. And I'm just being in the moment.
I'm sort of with the, sending out the messages to other MPs saying, if you hear this word, respond like this. It's like, it reminds me of Pee-wee's Playhouse and the word of the day. Is that basically what it is?
It's question period. It shouldn't be theater, and it certainly shouldn't be, as one of my friends, actually a friend in the Conservative caucus said, it's bad kabuki theater, which it shouldn't be. I mean, it should be an intelligent exchange of ideas, and it should be, it's parliament, is the word means parla. It's about speaking and talking and listening. It should be at least about a little bit of listening. But increasingly, particularly because of social media, a lot of the party backroom people control what goes on in the front room, and their idea is you want a clip that might go viral.
Right.
So you're going to get up and say something or do something really outrageous because that increases the likelihood that your algorithms are going to spike. So the Conservative, I hope they change, but certainly their obsession has been for algorithms that do good rage farming. Let's make people really angry. We don't care who they're, obviously they do care who they're angry at. For a long time, their bread and butter was to make people hate Justin Trudeau. So it's an algorithm tied thing from social media. So if you see something spike, let's do that again. It's really hard to be living in that space and working in that space and trying to offer something like helpful, collaborative, intelligent commentary. It's sometimes appreciated, and sometimes I can't get through explaining why I wish they'd stop heckling because of the heckling while I explain that I wish they'd really stop heckling.
I remember that.
I don't like this whole world where everyone's competing for clicks. I mean, I thought it was hard enough just for me to compete for clicks, but I don't like when politicians and news sources have to do it as well. It's not good. It's not good for us.
It's quick off the cuff hatred is a bad thing, and it's not Canadian. So
No.
I like it. I mean, I've been loving. There've been moments of Team Canada rally round, elbows up that I've totally loved.
Sure.
I hope we don't lose that.
It's funny that you mentioned like what's happening in Parliament and social media, because you see that, right? The same messaging, the same posts going out by certain parties. It seems very manufactured to try and get those clicks, right? And to amplify the rage. Yeah.
And I think frustratingly is, of course, that tactic is transparently awful as it is, and as transparent in general as it is, it seems to work, which is frustrating.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, this last election was kind of awful in lots of ways. One being that the way it was treated was as if we were in the United States and had a two-party system, and worse, we're actually electing a prime minister, which we don't do. Right. But it was hard to get that through to anyone during the election because it was so overwhelmingly Mark Carney versus Pierre Poilievre. So in terms of, though, the encouraging bit was, and I've got, I'm still trying to figure out what it's going to be like with Mark Carney as prime minister. So far, I'm not having fun with it, but never mind. What in that kind of binary choice of Pierre Poilievre, whose bread and butter had been for so long based on rage farming, and making people respond to a lot of hatred. I mean, I never thought I'd see the day that a Canadian prime minister taking his son out snowboarding would be attacked by an otherwise, I'm sure, nice person who said, get the blank out of my province. That's not the way we really behave, especially in front of people's children. But that didn't, in the end, carry the day in the election. And if anything, I think Mark Carney's appeal, since nobody really knows who he is, was to be an adult, a grown-up in the room, was preferable to a raging adolescent.
I love that she says things like that. It makes me so happy.
Well, I mean, there was Mark Burry's book to say, I don't know if you saw Mark Burry's book about Pierre Poilievre, was it? There's just this, he's, a raging adolescent in a grown-up man's body.
It's not a bad description.
Period.
It's distressing, but it's not a bad description at all. Which there's a couple things. We're going to talk later about how we feel about Mark Carney and the job he's doing and the things he's doing. But first, I think that I think when we have to the news cycle has been taken over by this horrendous crime in the States, this murder in the States, or assassination as some calling it, of Charlie Kirk, the Turning Point USA right-wing influencer who was shot and killed at an event in Utah. And it's been horrendous for lots of reasons. One, I when I found out that he'd been shot, I remember posting, this is a horrendous thing, that the fact that he's been shot, this is terrible, and that violence, and I think specifically political violence, but violence in general, doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't solve anything. All it does is create more violence. That's all it does. And it's been distressing to watch the people who are celebrating, I guess, in a sense. And I think also the people who are lionizing, I think, is also distressing. And there's a way to deal with, when people that you don't agree with and don't like and think are terrible people die, there's a way to deal with that. And I think it's been interesting and distressing is, again, to sort of watch how it's been handled online. Most pointedly, the fact that someone had pointed out that in all of the eulogizing that's happening for Charlie Kirk, they talk about him, but they can't show any examples of his work, which is distressing.
Yeah, well, but it's a murder, and
Yeah.
murders are horrific.
Yeah.
I had a friend murdered, and it's something you just never get over. a murder is a terrible thing, and regardless of what someone is saying, if they're saying hateful things, they're saying hateful things, but nothing, period, nothing justifies violence. So, and this is not just a person saying hateful things, this is a father of kids who now don't have their dad. So it's clear, well, we don't know yet. We know that the person who is the likely killer has turned himself in, apparently with help from his family, who said, you must turn yourself in. He also is on sort of the demographics, not unlike Charlie Kirk, a young white guy from Utah. And so that, the political violence escalating situation would be much worse if it were a trans woman, if it was a young man of color, if it was an immigrant, if it was many categories of identity politics. But the horror of it is that it could get worse. I mean, Gabby Gifford was shot in Arizona how long ago now, and thank God she survived that. There have been political assassinations of lawmakers in their own homes. This is in some ways sui generis because it was a political rally with someone who's as a job description, influencer is relatively new. And certainly being born in 1954, it's so new that I'd say probably heard of influencers for the first time a couple years ago. So most of my life, I was blessedly free of influencers. But now we know who they are, and they make, it's crazy. In my world of a boomer, okay, so old, the influencers are what? And in the case of Charlie Kirk, he was having an influence, and we can't say, as you say, Brittlestar. You can't say, Stuart. We know what he did. What did you accomplish as an influencer? That doesn't diminish in any way the horror and the condemnation that somebody was shot and killed, which is why we want laws that restrict access to guns. And Canada, the death rate from random acts of violence using guns in Canada is a teeny tiny fraction of what happens in the U.S. almost routinely in terms of horror of school shootings, the horror of opening fire on crowds of people attending music. I mean, the examples just keep coming to mind. This killing of someone who was expressing his views that guns were a good thing in society, well, that doesn't mean that anyone should be anything other than horrified that he was killed using a rifle. Any killing, if someone had run up to him and stabbed him, it's also horrific. But nobody who is calling for gun control should take any satisfaction in an advocate for access to guns being killed with a gun. That's not anything but horrific. It's just one further example of why access to dangerous weapons should be very carefully restricted.
I think a lot of people, and it made me slightly angry, a lot of people were referring to his quote, "It's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment. That is a prudent deal." And people saying, well, listen, he said that and this is what happened. And there's a dark, awful humor to that. But at the same time, my view is, well, he was obviously wrong.
Yes.
I mean, this just kind of proves it, which is the horrible part. I don't like the fact that his death was used. People were desperate to politicize his death.
I found that really also extremely distressing that anybody would, in any instance, and it does happen in other cases too, saying, well, they kind of the notion of they had it coming because they were fill in the blank. And that's never the case. It's always wrong.
Yeah.
And again, the Second Amendment, I wish people knew some history. The Second Amendment was about the right to have a well-regulated militia. They're putting something together at the time that the U.S. revolutionaries had only very recently thrown off British rule, and they were quite worried that they might get invaded again. So they had this notion of a well-regulated militia. Lone wolf actors, well-armed with guns that could never have been imagined by the guys who were loading their musket. Rapid fire rounds such as blew apart the tiny children of Newtown, Connecticut. This kind of thing never leaves me as a horror. I mean, you think about École Polytechnique, and why on earth would anyone want to have guns that have nothing to do with hunting and everything to do with killing?
Yeah. It's, here's the thing. When it happened, I didn't respond to it right away because I like to sort of see what the fallout, unfortunately, is going to be. And as polarizing as politics is right now, in the US and even in Canada, the response was equally as polarizing. You had people saying, yes, it's any death, any untimely death is horrible. You had people pulling out the quotes, right? Saying, well, you got what you... Yeah. Watch what you wish for. And I am of the view that, again, any untimely death is a tragedy, regardless. People threw out, well, if it was Hitler, would you feel the same way? Like, we can't do that. We can't compare the two. But I do, if I take myself out of it and I think about the brink to that people have been pushed to, whether it's in the US, whether even in Canada, with rights being threatened or taken away, things like that. I understand why some people are saying that, because we've stopped viewing people as humans and just as representatives of what it is that they believe in. See, I'm petty. I would rather someone have to, sorry, Stuart's worried. I would rather, because we see it all the time, right? Even with Trump, it's like, who's going to do it? I would rather have them have to see the turn of people away from those ideologies to something more inclusive and collaborative than getting rid of the problem. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know.
Well, I mean, let's talk about another level of reaction, which I think is worth talking about, because I mean, people's reaction to Charlie Kirk's death is, as you say, in itself polarizing on social media. But for Donald Trump to decide this is such a singularly horrific death that all flags in the U.S. must be lowered. Violence can never be justified, according to Donald Trump, unless it's the violent hoodlums who attacked on January 6th to try to overturn the results of a democratically achieved election. Those guys who, injured and killed police officers and others, Trump celebrates because they were on his side. So this is another thing about political violence. Or any violence, if you stand firm in the position, as I do as a pacifist and someone who opposes violence, and by the way, I have one small plug, the Green Party is the only party, and we're global, with a core value of promoting nonviolence and a culture of peace. Now, it's hard because we also we've got to defend Ukraine. I mean, there's lots of times that people say, well, wait a minute, where are we now? How do we justify it? But our core values are for nonviolence and peace. So, and in terms of political protest, I've been involved in nonviolent civil disobedience, and I think it's an important part of a democracy. So, but pulling back from that and saying, okay, look at President Trump for a minute. Here's someone who gave pardons to people convicted of violent offenses, and yet says there's some people who are so valuable because they're part of his base. And that business of saying, so if people of the left like me don't decry a violent murder of a young man, no matter how awful what he's saying is, I mean, that's part of our core civil liberties. You may be spouting horrible things, but in a free society, other than you're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded movie theater, but we do understand the principles of free speech as being a core value in any democracy. So he had the right to say horrible things, and we don't know yet what the motivations of the young man who killed him might have been. Who knows? From the same culture, same state, we don't know. We know nothing yet of motivations. But regardless of what his motivations may have been, it's absolutely horrific. And it'll be a trauma that sticks with people. And again, to the larger picture, what we mustn't allow is that it becomes normalized. The people who stand up and speak fervently about something they care about can be killed. That is where democracies, free speech, and respect for civil liberties will begin to fall apart.
It puts everybody at risk, right? Like it, regardless of side, it puts everybody at risk. My response is that, as you said, if President Trump is responding to this individual who maybe had some influence, but was really just a political personality, if you're going to manifest that the entire country must respect the loss of this person, where is that same empathy or understanding or care for children who have lost their lives, right? Just going to school. And that's the polarization that I think a lot of people are feeling. It's like, okay, well, what about the innocent people? They don't think they view Mr. Kirk as being innocent. So that's the hard part.
I think there's a lot of transactional aspect to the polarizing effect it had, the reaction online. I think a lot of people on either side of what you just determined to be right or wrong, it seems obvious to me, they thought they could use this as a moment as currency for the moment. They're going to be able to use it to further their cause, to further their argument, to further their position. And I think I'll give someone like Michelle Rempel Garner the benefit of the doubt, but she said, I respectfully request that Canada's Prime Minister make a statement about the death of Charlie Kirk. At the same time, I saw posts from people who were women of color who were like, if you're saying stuff like this, you're obviously white and you were never in the crosshairs. So you're, probably a male. And I think that's frustrating. I think what's even, as Elizabeth, you said that we don't know, of course, we might never know the exact motives for what's happened and why the shooter did what he did. However, it's come to light apparently just recently that he was, as you said, Republican parents and part of this MAGA Groypers movement, which is started by Nick Fuentes. Essentially, they felt that people like Charlie Kirk weren't right enough. They needed to be more extreme right. And a fantastic post here by Carl Bode, who said, if this shooter winds up being a red-pilled Groyper, there's so much language.
Yeah.
If this shooter winds up being a red-pilled Groyper, the Kirk news cycle length will be mysteriously cut from 2 months to 2 days. That's a quote post over top of a cut by Aaron Rupar of Trump being asked on the White House lawn. A reporter said to him, my condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. How are you holding up? Trump answered, I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They're just started construction of the new ballroom. Okay. Like this guy, yesterday he was like, this Charlie Kirk is going to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Flags are at half mast, and they find out he's politically no value as currency now. So that's fine. Let's move on.
Well, okay. So that's mind blowing. The notion of posting something. I as leader of the Green Party generally post something when a notable figure anywhere or an event and an expression of condolences. So the last thing I posted of horror and condolences was for the attack on the bus in Jerusalem. I didn't feel compelled to post anything about Charlie Kirk's murder because it's just it's obviously yet another horrible gun death in the United States, and I didn't. Not someone where I felt this is a moment where I must. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have that feeling in Canadian politics of I must when something's happened in a foreign country. Obviously, Netanyahu deciding it's okay for Israel to bomb Qatar because they knew the building where Hamas would be, because the peace talks were happening there. How convenient to know where Hamas leadership would be because they're involved in peace talks with Qatar, an ally of U.S. and basically historically Israel, and a country that could be, well, a country that was trying to broker a peace deal and also doing it with Trump's engagement. That was something that called out for a public statement, because it's so off the charts, violating so many levels of international law and any quest for peace. I didn't even have a moment, maybe I was wrong, maybe I didn't even have a moment where I thought I must grab some device and post something about how horrible. I mean, it seemed it was so obvious that it was a murder. It's a horrible murder and it's gun violence. the idea that Michelle Rempel Garner thinks that our prime minister should post something at a more public level of a statement about it seems out of proportion, and I don't know if that's my mistake, that it's something where I should have posted something. I just felt it was obviously horrible that someone had been killed. And I decry all the gun deaths we ever see. They're horrible. And random attacks on people, whether on streets in Canada or anywhere, are you can't and for any political figure, based on the kinds of things they say, to be targeted. Now, we don't know that was the case here, but something about Charlie Kirk obviously led to someone deciding to shoot him, but we don't know that either. Maybe they knew each other in Utah earlier, and there was some slight. We have nothing but speculation at this point, and I don't like to speculate. I want to let the police do their investigation, and in this case, which is rare, the shooter wasn't killed on sight. So we have someone who's alive, who is at this point, based on the partial information we get through the media, especially given that his family said, you've got to turn yourself in, we'll probably learn more. This is one of those cases where we're never going to know the motivation of the man who shot at Donald Trump and injured his ear back in that election campaign. We'll never know what was going on with that guy, right? Because he was killed on sight. Mm-hmm. This is a chance to at least know more, and I'd like to wait and know more before jumping to conclusions about why someone was killed in broad daylight in front of people in the midst of an address. Those kinds of shocking moments don't do society any good, and either making much of yourself to find something to say about Charlie Kirk in the moment, other than this is a tragedy. It is. At a personal level, it's a tragedy. There's no way that you can dress this up and say, well, he had it. I can't do that. I can't say somebody had it coming. In any case, we don't know enough now for me to feel that I should say something. And I sure don't think the Prime Minister of Canada needs to make a public statement about this, as much as Michelle Rempel Garner often says things with which I will agree. In this case, I don't agree with her.
I'm going to give you a pass to say that absolutely not. I don't. It was a completely transactional issue, because had it been somebody not on their side, we'll say, there would have been no call out. Now, if you want to take a look at the situation and speak on, the importance of reducing gun violence, but that would be a critique, right? And they don't want to critique their buddies. It just seemed very transactional and inflammatory. I mean, that's Michelle. Of course, she lives in the States most of the time. So, but even that in my mind just perpetuates this political violence. And then you have Andrew Scheer attacking certain people and calling things out, which also perpetuates that violence, right? That's nobody, I think, took the step back to breathe and think about things before reacting. And it goes back to the whole for clicks, right? For algorithm and for clicks.
I think it was basically seen as an opportunity, which is so distasteful. The part that's really distasteful to me is it was seen as an opportunity on largely one side of the argument than the other, but both sides of the argument for sure, to score points. Mm-hmm. And I hated that about it, because as you said, Elizabeth, it's tragedy. It's absolute tragedy. And one of the things when terrible people die, you don't have to be sad about it, but you also don't have to be a jerk.
Yeah.
You just be like, right. That's too bad.
I mean, and the fact that we have this expectation that people are going to make statements fast. And so in this case, I didn't. And I'm glad to have the chance to talk to you guys about it, because it's in the ether. It's all around us now. It's taken on as a conversation in a way that I wouldn't have expected when I first heard about it. But, I like to take my time and think things over and know what I'm talking about before speaking, which is going to make me remarkably unsuccessful.
Imagine how that's gonna
that's
bode
not
well
how social
for you.
media works, Elizabeth.
That's not how politics works.
No, off to the races. I mean, no, I clickbait stuff I just hate.
It's
So-
the thing that's funny to me though, because when you had people on the side of like he got what he deserved and it must, the other side was like, well, it had to be somebody that didn't like what he had to say and good, like whatever it is. What people have to realize is that based on these movements, these political movements that are happening, for every one Charlie Kirk in front of the camera, there's 10 behind. Do you know what I mean? Like the idea isn't, I had somebody in my comment just basically berate me for not celebrating it. And my response to that was the idea, if you think that the idea is to get rid of every fascist, pseudo-fascist, person of leaning, you missed the point. The idea is to change the perception and to have people understand that that isn't beneficial to them and make that move. And yes, you know what? It takes time and a lot of things are going to happen in between. But we can't go around saying, you're a fascist, we need to get rid of you. Because again, that can go our way too, right? Like,
The other thing is, I guess part of it is back to his job description, influencer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, someone who's accomplished a great deal in life, and you think this is, there's a reason to speak to it. If it becomes, as it has right now, a major event because of what he stood for, then I really fear we're elevating what he stood for as if it was an important voice in society, as opposed to a hateful voice in society.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that there's anything other than 100% completely immoral, wrong, illegal, horrific that he was killed in the way he was killed. But it also, letting it dominate our conversation, suggests that he represented an important voice as opposed to an irrelevant and scary and unhelpful distortion of not our society, the U.S., but to the extent that we get ourselves polarized in the same way, it's not healthy.
Well,
not healthy.
The last thing I want is someone with those beliefs being viewed as a martyr. And that's what happened for the first day or so, right? Like he became a martyr for free speech, which right? He became a martyr for a lot of things. And we don't want that, right? Like I would rather just see them peter out when people start to realize that isn't a beneficial viewpoint anymore.
And the way in which he was killed, and the fact he was killed with gun violence, which he had defended and saying if a few people have to die so we protect our right to bear arms. I mean, those quotes are there.
Mm-hmm.
They're obvious. They were wrong before he was killed. His killing doesn't prove they were wrong. It just adds to the horror of the gun death statistics of the United States,
and the fact
why we should keep ensuring Canada has strong gun laws, which we do, thank heavens.
And we have to remember that not everybody that attends one of those types of events is on the side of the speaker, right? A lot of times people go to his events to challenge his beliefs. And the fact that nobody else was hurt is a blessing, right? Because it could have
been terrible.
100%, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Stuart, you can talk now.
Finally.
It's the Liz and Lisa show.
Yeah, well, I like it, really. It's a good format, but who's the guy?
I know.
Yeah, exactly.
He turns on the lights. That's what he does.
That's about it. Exactly. I was going to say that, I think maybe Lisa, you had mentioned about how, and Elizabeth, you both mentioned, I think, about the fact that we're, in Canada, it's not the same situation as in the States, but my concern is that we're kind of creeping in that direction with things like Michelle Rempel Garner requesting, and just for record, Carney did tweet about Charlie Kirk's death, saying, "I am appalled by the murder of Charlie Kirk. There's no justification for political violence, and every act of it threatens democracy." So, even-handed, I'm fine with that. That's totally fine. Rempel Garner also criticized comments saying that some of the comments normalized political violence. I agree, and then saying how terrible it was that some people implied that Kirk deserved it, which I also agree with. And the conservative kind of push was that Carney he must affirm democratic norms by speaking out. And it's like, okay, I get that. Then, and I don't think, and you didn't say the name, Lisa, but I feel like because she's posted it online, I sort of feel okay saying that the fact that it was Rachel Gilmore. Andrew Scheer quote tweeted Rachel's tweet, and Rachel posted, terrified to think of how far-right fans of Kirk, aching for more violence, could very well turn this into an even more radicalizing moment. Will they now believe their fears have been proven right and feel they have a right to retaliate regardless of who actually was behind the initial shooting? And Andrew Scheer posted, imagine how twisted she has to be that this is her first thought after a man was shot in the neck for expressing his views. So much hate in her. To which Rachel said, is Andrew Scheer trying to get me killed? She used an expletive in that, but I won't do that. And that really distresses me because I think that there's I was just going back to the idea that the death, the murder, the assassination, whatever you want to call it, was being transactionalized, was being politicized so quickly and hopefully used as currency by one side or the other. Yeah. And people forget that words are dangerous. Mm-hmm. Like I think, one of the things I'm thinking to myself a number of years ago was that when you start to use, rage bait and you're trying to rile people up and get them angry and keep them angry all the time, you're creating an army of idiots. And the downside of creating an army of idiots is that you've got an army full of idiots. So you end up with exactly the thing you don't want as your own problem. And that's what concerns me about that in Canada. That's one of the things that bothers me the most about the Conservative Party currently. And I think I've mentioned in previous episodes, I think last week I was saying that I voted for Conservative. I voted NDP. I voted Liberal. I never voted Green. No, actually, that's true. I did vote Green, actually. There you go.
Thank God.
Don't tell anyone.
I voted Liberal, Conservative, NDP, but I generally vote Green. But I have voted because I tend to also vote by who I think is the best local candidate in my community, and that's going to vary.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my point being is that one of the things that bothers me the most is that there's a movement for clicks. There's a movement for rage baiting that seems to forget that words have consequences. Words, like when this happened to Charlie Kirk, I didn't go, oh my God, who would have ever thought? This is totally out of the blue. I thought, well, all you're doing is making people pissed off all the time. Mm-hmm. It's not that. It's terrible. It's a tragedy, but it's not that surprising, which is awful.
Yeah, and I hope it's not Canada. I mean, so let's just draw a line here and say what we've seen on the rise in Canada for sure, and we just had a round of media stories about the number of acts that are hostile, threatening, and cross the line into actual assault and violence against our constituency offices and that kind of thing that never used to happen before. I remember, it was quite a while ago that a friend of mine in Parliament, it was during COVID, because I'm thinking back to how it was that we were in the House and things were quite divided, and then we were moving into virtual. But a friend of mine said, I really have to get home because it was someone who represented a rural riding. Everyone knows where I live, and my wife is home alone. I've got to get back because I'm worried about her safety. Now, that's not something that anyone would have considered in Canadian politics pre-COVID. I'll just put that as a line. So the fragmenting of society into beginning, and also for public figures, and certainly Pam Damoff was very public about why she decided not to run again. I think she was a great MP. I loved working with her. Obviously, she was Liberal. It doesn't matter. They're good, hardworking MPs in all parties, and you really don't want to see someone withdrawing from public life because they feel unsafe and they dislike having the flood of vitriol that comes to us through social media. I don't want to. Canadian society at its best is really defined by the idea that we can disagree without being disagreeable. And I've always liked that about Parliament until it became really quite disagreeable. So I think, okay, can we just get back to, I don't think it'll go anywhere, but I think my response to MAGA hats, Make America Great Again, is I'd like a hat that just make Canada boring again. Please, because I don't find this excitement fun.
Yeah. We were going to talk about some other stuff, but I think this has been an important conversation to have. So we'll kind of just finish up a little bit with a couple of questions. Elizabeth, do you feel that there's first of all, is a big question, is America salvageable? just from an outside perspective? And second question would be, can we steer ourselves in Canada away from that same fate?
Yeah. So to the first question, I think the answer has to be we have to hope it is salvageable. But for the first time in a very long time, it's an open question. Maybe the first time ever. So the damage that Trump is doing, I think people who assume this will all be over, it's kind of like COVID. This will all be over as soon as we get a vaccine.
Right.
We were wrong. It's the fracturing of our society is not over. What Trump is doing and what's happening to the United States of America isn't over when he stops being president, because the damage that's being done runs really deep and runs to proving that the U.S. Constitution can't be counted on to constrain the excesses of a rogue president. That's not something we've ever seen before, and I'm a student of history, and I grew up in the States, and I never thought we'd see anything like this. And I don't think we can't assume that the U.S. is salvageable, but we have to hope it is, because it's obviously powerful, our neighbor, and if U.S. democracy goes down, that's not going to be good for the world.
And do we feel that there's a way for Canada to steer away from this? I guess it'd be identity politics of that idea of, which one of the things I despise is when people assume that saying that they're left or right is enough to save them, is enough to be like, well, I'm part of the right, I'm part of the left. Those people, it's us and them all the time, and it's like, no, we're all independent thinkers here. We can decide ourselves. We don't need to lump ourselves into a group to make the right decisions. Yeah. Is there a way for us to steer out of trouble in Canada?
I hope so. Avoiding polarized politics is key. I would love to see social media controlled by saying, this is my quick solution, by the way, in 10 seconds. There are no platforms. There are only publishers. And publishers are responsible for what they publish. And that means you can't take anonymous comments and spread them around. You're responsible. And I don't care, Meta or Google, any of these tech billionaire giants are a cancerous growth on democracy, and the best way to deal with them is not to have government try to regulate what speech is okay and what speech isn't, but just go back to the hundreds of years of jurisprudence that says, well, that's libel, that's slander, you can take it to court. And the person who said those words and the person who published those words are both responsible for damages. Because right now, the rogue nature of social media is a huge threat to democracy. So is foreign interference. We've got a lot of different things happening all at once. Canada is salvageable because Canadians love their country and are generally willing, and sort of as a cultural identity, we are more focused on the whole. We are more focused on community. We don't celebrate selfish individualism. We do sometimes, but that's dangerous. We celebrate community, neighbors, and the willingness to pitch in together. That's a Canadian value, and that's what will save us from going the direction of the, I don't know, I never told you guys this, but Farley Mowat was one of my best friends, and he always used to call it the excited states of America. So that's what will save us from the fate of the excited states of America, is just being really sure we love each other.
I love it. It was wonderful.
I need a big hug.
I know, exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Elizabeth.
Arms outstretched.
Right.
That's my motto. Elbows up.
Thank you so much for giving us some of your time, Elizabeth. You're always insightful. And as I said at the top of the show, you come across initially as a bit wacky, but damn it, you know your stuff.
Well, God bless you for knowing I'm wacky. I love my sense of humor, even if nobody else does. So I have, I say I'm either post-pol, and I'm not retiring, by the way, just make that sure that's really clear. But I figure at some point I'll retire, and I either want to be a stand-up comic or a sit-down comic, depending on how my knees are doing. So that's my post-politics life.
Well, we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do. Thank you so much. And just stick around, Elizabeth. Don't go anywhere yet. But everyone else, thank you so much for watching and or listening to Politics is Broken. You can find us at brittlestar.com or searching Politics is Broken on your favorite podcasting platform, where we are skyrocketing. We were the #1 show in the government category in Apple Podcasts across Canada, and even peeked our head into the U.S. a little bit in the government category. And I think we're number 30 or something like that in the U.K. We're everywhere now.
I don't know. I know Belize loves us. So
Belize. Do you know what's going on in Belize at all, Elizabeth?
I do.
Do you know somebody in Belize?
I know a lot of people.
Okay.
In Belize. Yeah. We had a huge fight there to try to stop. It was a Canadian company building a dam. That's a long story. And the habitat of the jaguars. It was amazing. We took the fight all the way to. This was about 15 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't account for our huge success in podcast charts in Belize currently.
It may just have been that early fight within Canada to protect the biosphere.
They remember.
It's like Normandy, right? Like they remember.
Yeah, the Belizeans remember everything.
Okay, the name of the company was Fortis, and Fortis building that dam, and we took it all the way to the British High Court of the House of Lords. That's their highest court in Belize. So that used to be us before we have our own Supreme Court. Long story, way too long. But my only theory is that early experience of experiencing a really bad Canadian company trying to destroy your ecosystem made people in Belize more attuned to Canadian political commentary.
Right. Excellent.
And then they found this show and said, oh, well, thank God, that explains the whole thing.
They're not coming after our jaguars. They're like, all right, we like them.
Well, thanks again. Stick around, Elizabeth. Everyone else, take care of yourselves. We'll see you next week.
Bye,
Take care.
everybody.
You've been listening to Politics is Broken with Brittlestar and Lisa B. The audio version of this podcast is produced by Owen Reynolds for the Podcast is Broken Network. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, and comment. And don't forget to check out Brittlestar.com for more.